The stars twinkled against the darkness of space as the human exploration vessel Pioneer drifted toward the massive alien station. Captain James Miller stood at the bridge's viewport, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. 20 years of space exploration had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now something felt off about this first contact. Receiving docking instructions from the Strider station, "Captain," announced Tom from the communications console. The young officer's voice carried an edge of excitement that made Miller smile. First contact missions were always special, even for veteran space explorers. The Striders had discovered humanity 3 months ago, when their scout ships detected Earth's deep space signals. Their initial messages painted them as peaceful explorers, tall, crystalline beings whose civilization spanned dozens of star systems. They invited Earth to join their galactic community, but insisted on meeting humanity's representatives at their own station. Miller watched as the station grew larger in the viewport. Its crystal-like structure caught the light of the nearby star, sending rainbow refractions across the Pioneer's bridge. "Begin docking sequence," he ordered, straightening his dress uniform. "And someone tell Dr. Reed to stop running last-minute tests. We're about to make history." The docking went smoothly, too smoothly, Miller thought. The Striders had provided exact specifications for everything, down to the air pressure in the airlock. As his team of 5 prepared to board the station, Miller noticed the strange silence. Most alien stations buzzed with activity, but this one felt eerily quiet. "Remember," Miller addressed his team, "we represent all of humanity today. Dr. Reed, you have the scientific papers. Lieutenant Brown, stay sharp but keep that hand away from your sidearm. We're guests here." The airlock cycled, and they stepped into the station. The interior sparkled like a geode, with crystalline growths forming natural-looking corridors. 2 Striders waited for them, tall, angular beings that seemed to be made of living crystal. Their bodies were semi-transparent, with points of light moving through them like stars in a galaxy. "Welcome, humans," the taller Strider spoke, its voice resonating like wind through crystal chimes. "I am first speaker. We have much to discuss." Miller stepped forward, extending his hand in greeting. "Captain James Miller of the Earth Exploration Force. We're honored to be here." The first speaker regarded Miller's hand with what looked like curiosity, but made no move to take it. Instead, it gestured for them to follow. "Come, we have prepared a meeting chamber." As they walked through the crystalline corridors, Miller noticed more Striders watching from side passages. Their crystalline bodies seemed to pulse with faster-moving lights when the humans passed. Dr. Reed was practically bouncing with excitement, her sensors discreetly recording everything. The meeting chamber was a vast room with a central table that appeared to grow straight from the floor. The humans took their seats, and Miller couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Striders moved with an efficiency that seemed rehearsed, positioning themselves precisely around the room. "We have studied your biology," the first speaker began, its tone different now. "Your ability to heal, to adapt, to survive. It is remarkable. Perhaps too remarkable." Miller tensed. There was something in the Strider's voice that set off every alarm in his veteran mind. "We believe in peaceful cooperation," he said carefully. "Our adaptability could benefit both our species." "No," the first speaker's crystalline body pulsed with red light. "Your kind would spread, adapt, multiply. We have seen such species before. They begin as friends and become conquerors. We cannot allow this." Miller's hand moved toward his sidearm, but he was too late. Hidden panels in the wall slid open, revealing dozens of armed Striders. Their crystalline bodies hummed with energy as they raised their weapons. "For the safety of all," the first speaker declared, "humanity must be contained." The last thing Miller saw before the energy weapons fired was Dr. Reed's horrified face and Lieutenant Brown diving for cover. The air filled with the scent of ozone as the room erupted in chaos, marking the moment when humanity's dreams of peaceful first contact shattered like crystal. Energy beams lit up the crystal chamber like lightning in a storm, Captain Miller's military training kicked in instantly. "Get to the door," he shouted, throwing himself between his team and the Strider weapons. Searing pain ripped through his shoulder as the first shot hit him, but he stayed standing. The Striders paused for a moment, their crystalline bodies flickering with surprise. According to their research, a direct hit should have dropped any living being instantly. Instead, Miller was still moving, his face twisted in pain, but his eyes burning with determination. "Keep firing." The first speaker's voice rang through the chamber. More energy beams struck Miller's body. Each hit felt like being stabbed with white-hot pokers, but something strange was happening. The pain was there, but it wasn't stopping him. If anything, each hit made him feel more alert, more alive, as if his body was being flooded with pure adrenaline. "Captain," Dr. Reed screamed as she saw blood starting to soak through his uniform. But Miller wasn't listening. His world had narrowed down to one goal: protecting his people. Lieutenant Brown had managed to flip the crystal table, creating some cover. "This way," he called to the others. The young security officer fired his sidearm at the ceiling, causing crystal shards to rain down on some of the Striders. Their bodies chimed in distress as they scattered to avoid the falling fragments. Miller felt his legs trembling, but he refused to fall. 3 more shots hit him in the chest. He could smell his own burning flesh now, but somehow the pain was becoming distant, as if his body was adapting to it. He grabbed a piece of fallen crystal and hurled it at the nearest weapon emplacement, his strength surprising even himself. "Impossible." The first speaker's voice carried both fear and fascination. "No species has ever remained conscious after more than 2 hits. The human team was almost to the door now. Miller staggered backward, still shielding them. Blood dripped onto the crystal floor, but his eyes remained clear and focused. "We're harder to kill than you thought," he growled through gritted teeth. Dr. Reed was the last one through the door. "Captain, come on," she yelled. But as Miller turned to run, a concentrated burst of energy from multiple weapons caught him squarely in the back. He fell forward, his body finally overwhelmed by the combined assault. Through blurring vision, he saw his team hesitate at the door. "Go," he ordered, his voice still strong despite his injuries. "That's an order. Get to the ship." The last thing he heard was the sound of his team's retreating footsteps, mixed with the approaching chimes of the Strider guards. A smile crossed his pain-twisted face. His people were safe. Everything else was secondary. The first speaker approached Miller's fallen form, its crystalline body now pulsing with rapid, excited lights. "Remarkable," it hummed. "You took 17 direct hits before falling. Our weapons were specifically calibrated to disrupt organic nervous systems." Miller tried to push himself up, earning more surprised chimes from the watching Striders as his muscles trembled with effort. A guard quickly shot him again, and this time the darkness finally took him. "Take him to the research level," the first speaker ordered. "I want to know how he survived. And send pursuit teams after the others, though I doubt they'll catch them." Their ship was ready for a quick departure. As the Striders carried Miller's unconscious body away, they failed to notice something extraordinary. Where his blood had fallen on the crystal floor, tiny cracks were already beginning to heal themselves, almost as if the humans' incredible resilience had somehow affected the very structure of their station. The first speaker watched the humans' vitals on a floating crystal display. Despite everything, they remained strong and steady. "We may have discovered something far more interesting than we initially feared," it mused, "and far more dangerous." Miller woke to the sound of humming crystals. His body felt like it had been run over by a shuttle, but he was alive. The room around him was a maze of crystal tubes and floating displays. He tried to move, only to find himself held down by bands of pure energy. "The subject is conscious again," a melodic voice noted. A Strider researcher moved into view, its crystalline form smaller and more delicate than the guards. "Remarkable recovery time. 7th awakening in 3 days." Miller's throat felt dry, but he managed to speak. 7 times. You've been putting me under. Correct. The researcher's body flickered with light patterns that Miller was starting to recognize as excitement. Each time we test your limits, you recover faster. Your cellular structure is adapting. More striders entered the laboratory, their bodies chiming in harmony as they moved around him. Miller counted 6 researchers and 2 guards. They had been watching him, studying him, and he had been conscious for more of it than they realized. The first speaker glided into the room. Begin the next test series. Miller braced himself as one of the researchers raised a crystal device. Pain shot through his body, different from the weapon blasts. This was deeper, like his very cells were being pulled apart. He clenched his jaw, refusing to scream. Note the response. The lead researcher chimed. Previous exposure has increased his tolerance by 40%, and observed the tissue regeneration rate. Through the haze of pain, Miller watched the displays. He couldn't read the Strider symbols, but he could see his own vital signs. They were stronger than before. Each time they hurt him, his body learned, adapted, grew stronger. Increase power, the first speaker ordered. The pain doubled. Miller's back arched against the restraints. But something was different this time. He could feel his muscles tensing, not in agony, but in response. His body wasn't just healing, it was changing. Extraordinary. A researcher chimed in alarm. The subject's cellular structure is actively reconfiguring to resist the stimulus. This goes beyond normal adaptation. The first speaker moved closer, its crystalline form pulsing with deep red light. Impossible. No species can evolve this rapidly. Miller felt a laugh bubble up through the pain. Maybe you should have studied human history better, he growled. We've been surviving impossible things since we crawled out of the mud. The energy bands holding him suddenly flickered. The researcher's chimes became urgent, alarmed. Power fluctuation in the containment field, one reported. The subject's bioelectric field is interfering with our systems. Impossible, the first speaker repeated, but there was fear in its harmonic voice now. Miller focused on the feeling of his changing body. Each burst of pain taught him something new. Each test made him stronger. He could feel the energy restraints weakening as his body somehow learned to disrupt them. Increase security, the first speaker ordered. Double the guard rotation, and prepare the deep analysis chamber. We need to understand this ability before it goes any further. As the striders rushed to follow orders, Miller closed his eyes, appearing to pass out. But he was far from unconscious. His mind was clear, cataloging everything he'd learned about their technology, their patterns, their fears. They thought they were studying him, but he was studying them too. In the corner of the lab, a crystal display showed his cellular structure. The image kept changing, showing adaptations that should have taken thousands of years of evolution. The striders didn't realize it yet, but their own tests were creating exactly what they feared most, a human who could not be contained. Prepare for deep analysis, the first speaker commanded. Tomorrow, we will understand everything. Miller kept his breathing steady, but inside, a grim smile formed. Tomorrow would come sooner than they thought, and it wouldn't go the way they planned. His body was almost ready. The deep analysis chamber was different from the regular lab. It was darker, with crystals that pulsed with deep purple light. Miller lay strapped to a vertical platform, his body connected to dozens of crystal sensors. After 3 weeks of tests, the striders thought they knew what to expect. They were wrong. Begin final analysis sequence, the lead researcher ordered. Its crystalline form vibrated with anticipation. Maximum power. The first speaker watched from a protected observation room. Are you certain this is wise? The subject's adaptations have been concerning. We must understand how he does it, the researcher replied. No species should be able to change this quickly. His cellular structure has evolved more in 3 weeks than most races do in 1,000,000 years. Miller kept his eyes closed, focusing on the energy flowing through the sensors. Over the weeks, he had learned to feel it, to understand it. Each test had taught him more about how the Strider's technology worked. And now he could feel something new. The energy wasn't just flowing into him. He could push it back. The machine hummed to life. Pain blazed through Miller's body, worse than anything before. But this time, instead of just enduring it, he embraced it. His muscles tensed, not in agony, but with purpose. Energy readings are off the scale, a researcher chimed in alarm. His body isn't just adapting, it's absorbing the power. Miller opened his eyes. They glowed with the same purple light as the crystals around him. You wanted to understand human adaptation. His voice was steady, strong. Let me show you. The energy restraints around his wrists flickered and died. Before the Striders could react, Miller ripped free from the platform. His skin crackled with absorbed energy, and where his feet touched the crystal floor, small cracks appeared and quickly healed, just like his own wounds had been doing. Impossible. The first speaker's voice rang with fear. Stop him. Guards rushed into the chamber, raising their weapons. Miller didn't try to dodge. The energy beams struck him, but instead of causing pain, they seemed to energize him further. His body had learned from weeks of experiments, adapted to turn their own power against them. Your weapons evolved us, Miller said, walking forward as more shots hit him harmlessly. Every test, every experiment, every bit of pain. You made us stronger. He reached out and grabbed a guard's weapon, crushing the crystal barrel in his hand. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to adapt and overcome. The crystal walls of the chamber began to vibrate in response to his voice. The Striders backed away, their bodies flashing with panic lights. They had created exactly what they feared most, a human who could not be stopped. Seal the chamber, the first speaker ordered. Crystal barriers began closing across the exits. Miller laughed. You still don't understand. He pressed his hand against a crystal wall, and instead of being stopped, the crystal responded to him, creating an opening. Your station remembers my blood, my changes. It's adapting too. The researchers fled in terror as Miller stepped through the wall. Alarms rang throughout the station, their crystalline tones a chaotic symphony of fear. Guards rushed to contain him, but their weapons were useless now. Send word to all military vessels. The first speaker's voice echoed through the station. The human must not escape. But Miller wasn't trying to escape. He walked purposefully toward the station's central control room, each step leaving glowing footprints in the crystal floor. The Striders had wanted to study human adaptation. Now they would experience it firsthand. Time to show you, Miller said to the fleeing Striders. Why throughout human history, it's been a terrible mistake to back us into a corner. Alarms rang through every crystal corridor of the station as Miller moved with steady purpose. Guards rushed to stop him, but he wasn't the same man they had captured 3 weeks ago. Not anymore. Containment fields at maximum. A Strider controller announced over the station's communication system. Energy barriers sprung up in Miller's path, their purple light filling the corridor. Miller didn't slow down. He walked straight through the barriers, his body absorbing their power. You taught me how your energy works, he called out, knowing the station's sensors would carry his voice to the frightened Striders. Every barrier you put up just makes me stronger. In the station's control center, the first speaker watched in horror as Miller's image appeared on crystal display after crystal display. How is he interfacing with our systems? A researcher's voice chimed with panic. His cellular structure has somehow merged with our crystal technology. The station is recognizing him as one of its own systems. Miller reached a junction where 3 guard teams had set up a defensive position, their weapons powered up with a high-pitched whine. Last chance, Miller warned them. Let me pass. Instead of answering, they opened fire. Energy beams filled the corridor, enough power to vaporize a normal human. But Miller just stood there, his skin absorbing the blasts with a purple glow. He raised his hand, and the crystal floor beneath the guards suddenly shifted, trapping their feet. "I don't want to hurt you," Miller said as he walked past their struggling forms. "But I will if I have to." The first speaker's voice rang through the station. "All personnel, abandon the research level. Seal all bulkheads." "Running won't help," Miller replied, his voice carrying through the station's crystal matrices. "You wanted to study human adaptation. Well, you succeeded. Now you get to see what happens when you push us too far." He reached the main research data center, where the Striders had stored all their findings about him. Guards had welded the crystal doors shut, but Miller simply pressed his hand against them. The crystal recognized him now, responding to his touch like a living thing. The doors melted away. Inside, researchers frantically tried to delete their data, but Miller had learned too much about their systems. With a thought, he locked them out of their own computers. "Your mistake," he said as they backed away from him, "wasn't capturing me. It wasn't even experimenting on me." "Then what was our mistake?" asked a brave researcher, its crystalline form trembling. "Thinking you could contain something that evolves as fast as humanity does." Miller stepped up to the main control crystal. "You wanted to know our secrets. Here's the biggest one. We don't just adapt to survive. We adapt to win." He placed his hand on the control crystal, and every display in the room lit up with data about his transformation. The Striders watched in terror as their own readings showed how their weapons and tests had changed him, how each attempt to hurt him had only made him more powerful. "Send this data to your leaders," Miller commanded. "Show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." The first speaker's voice came over the comm system, no longer commanding but pleading. "What do you want?" Miller smiled grimly. "First, I want control of this station. Then, we're going to have a long talk about peace between our species. And this time," his eyes glowed with purple fire, "you're going to listen." Throughout the station, crystals hummed in harmony with his words. The Striders had created their worst nightmare, a human who couldn't be stopped, couldn't be contained, and now controlled their most advanced technology. The hunt was over. Now came the reckoning. From the station's central control room, Miller stood before a wall of crystal displays. His body glowed with a faint purple light, matching the pulse of the station around him. The first speaker and several high-ranking Striders stood nearby, their crystalline forms dimmed with defeat. "Open a channel to both Earth and the Strider High Council," Miller ordered. The crystals responded instantly to his thoughts, connecting to communication networks across space. It's time everyone knew what happened here. The displays lit up, showing faces both human and Strider. Earth's Defense Council appeared on one side, their expressions mixing relief and concern at seeing Miller alive. On the other, the Strider High Council's crystal forms sparkled with nervous energy. "This is Captain James Miller of the Earth Exploration Force," he began, his voice steady. "3 weeks ago, I came to this station seeking peace between our peoples. Instead, I found fear, fear that led to betrayal." He waved his hand, and the displays showed recordings of the ambush, the experiments, and his transformation. The Striders saw humanity's ability to adapt as a threat. They tried to study it, to understand it, to control it. Instead, they made it stronger. The Strider High Council chimed in alarm as they watched the footage. "First speaker," one of them demanded, "explain these actions." "We feared their potential," the first speaker admitted, its voice heavy with regret. "Every species we had encountered before was stable, unchanging. But humans evolved before our eyes." Miller nodded. "You wanted to understand humanity. Here's what you need to know. We don't just adapt to survive. We adapt to thrive. Every challenge makes us stronger. Every obstacle teaches us something new." He gestured to his glowing form. "Your weapons changed me. Your tests improved me. Your own station now responds to my commands." Earth's Defense Council leaned forward. "Captain Miller," one asked, "are you suggesting the Striders have created a weapon?" "No." Miller's voice softened. "I'm suggesting they've created an opportunity." He turned to face both councils. "Look at what I've become. Not just human, Not just Strider technology, but something new. Something that proves our species can change, can grow, can become more than what we are. The displays showed new images. Miller's cellular structure merging with crystal technology, the station's systems adapting to his presence, the possibility of combining both species' strengths. "I'm not here for revenge," Miller continued. "I'm here to show you what's possible when we stop fearing change and start embracing it." The Striders tried to contain humanity's potential. Instead, they helped unlock it. A member of the Earth Council spoke up. "What are you proposing, Captain?" "A new kind of peace," Miller replied. "Not based on fear or control, but on mutual growth. The Striders understand crystal technology in ways we never could. We understand adaptation in ways they never imagined. Together, we could become something greater than either of us could be alone." The crystals around him pulsed with energy, reflecting his words. The Strider High Council's forms flickered with rapid light patterns as they discussed among themselves. Finally, their leader spoke. Perhaps, the High Council leader chimed, "We have been afraid of the wrong thing. We feared change itself, when we should have feared staying the same." Miller smiled. "That's the most human thing I've heard a Strider say." He reached out and touched a crystal wall, sending ripples of purple light through the station. "So, shall we begin again? This time as equals." The station hummed with possibility as both councils considered his words. The message was clear. Humanity couldn't be contained, couldn't be controlled, but they could be allied with, grown with, evolved with. The future stood balanced on the edge of transformation, waiting for both species to take the first step together. 1 year had passed since the events on the Strider station. Captain James Miller stood at the front of a large teaching chamber, facing a mixed group of human and Strider students. The room was built from a combination of earth steel and Strider crystal, symbolizing the new cooperation between their species. "And that's why," Miller said, his body still carrying a faint purple glow, "first contact protocols now require both species to be present." He touched the crystal wall, causing it to display images from that historic day. Because sometimes, the things we fear most are the things that can help us grow. A young Strider's form sparkled with curiosity. "Instructor Miller, do you regret what they did to you?" Miller looked down at his hand, watching the purple energy flow beneath his skin. "I regret that fear led to violence," he answered honestly. "But I don't regret what I became. Sometimes, the worst situations create the best opportunities." The station they were on now was new, built jointly by humans and Striders. It served as both an embassy and a research center, where both species studied the remarkable changes that had occurred in Miller's body. More importantly, they studied how those changes had affected the Strider's crystal technology. "The greatest discovery," Miller continued, walking among his students, "wasn't how humans could adapt to Strider technology. It was how Strider technology could adapt to us." He gestured to the walls around them, which pulsed with life. "Their living crystals learned from my changes, just as I learned from them." A human student raised her hand. "Is it true that some Striders are now showing signs of adaptation too?" Miller nodded, smiling. "Yes. After decades of fearing change, the Striders are learning to embrace it. Their younger generation is already showing more flexibility than their ancestors thought possible." The first speaker, now serving as a peace ambassador, entered the chamber. Its crystalline form had changed over the year, showing subtle patterns that looked almost human. "And we are better for it," it chimed, joining Miller at the front of the room. "Fear of change almost led us to war. Acceptance of change has led us to evolution." Together, they activated a large display, showing the progress of their joint ventures. New ships combining both technologies, medical breakthroughs using crystal healing properties, and space stations that could adapt to their inhabitants' needs. What had started as an attempt to contain humanity had instead unleashed potential in both species. "Remember this lesson," Miller told his students. "The universe is too big for any species to stay the same forever. Those who fear change try to stop it. Those who embraced change guided. The first speaker's form resonated in agreement. Our attempt to prevent human adaptation instead proved why it was necessary. In trying to contain humanity's greatest strength, we awakened our own. As the class ended, Miller watched his students file out, humans and striders together, each learning from the other's strengths. His body still hummed with the power they had given him. But now it served as a bridge between their peoples rather than a weapon. The next group arrives tomorrow, the first speaker noted. More worlds wanting to learn about our partnership. Miller nodded. Other species had taken notice of what humans and striders had achieved together. Some came seeking knowledge, others seeking protection, but all of them recognized that change was coming to the galaxy. They'll learn, Miller said, looking out at the stars through the crystal walls, just like we did. The future belongs to those who can adapt to it. The station pulsed with energy around them, its crystals singing in harmony with both its human and strider inhabitants. What had started with fear and violence had evolved into something neither species could have imagined alone. It was living proof that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't weapons or technology. It was the ability to change, to grow, and to become something new. The end.